Okay. All right. Welcome everyone. Today I just wanted to like outline how to work through these shifts. I saw it was an issue for some people in the quiz, and there's two things that you really want to keep in mind as you're identifying causal factors for a shift and then implementing it into the figure. So we'll go through like the two primary slides you can use as a reference, and then also go through the practice of how are you going to draw it on your own so that when you execute these shifts you can identify all the necessary pieces of information. So when it comes to demand side shifts, in our week 2 slides, these are all potential factors that could shift your demand curve. Remember, our demand curve is downward sloping in that it fits with the law of demand, having this inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. So as prices go up, we see that the quantity demanded falls. And then as we get discounts and as we get clearances and this price drops, our quantity demanded rises. Those allow us to move along the demand curve. But things that cause a shift, meaning we have to move the whole curve, these are all those factors. And so these are all complex factors that can play into a ton of different examples. Things like the price of a substitute rising. You can imagine if you have two different products that we view as substitutes. So for example, if you have Nike shoes and Adidas shoes, we generally treat them as fairly similar products, and we might treat those as substitutes. And so if our market here is for Nike shoes, and we see that the price of Adidas sneakers rises, then that can increase or shift to the right our demand for Nike shoes, because our substitute, the thing that we generally might replace them with, has gone up in price. And so vice versa, let's say the price of Adidas shoes drops relative to Nike, that can decrease our demand for Nike products. And so anytime we're drawing an arrow to the right and we're shifting that demand curve to the right, we're indicating an increase. And anytime we're drawing that arrow to the left, we're indicating a decrease. And that applies for all these factors here. There's all these numerous factors that can impact these shifts. And so feel really comfortable with navigating these definitions and being able to move these curves one way or another. But keeping it left and right is really simple. And I'll highlight why when we do the graphing section. But the other slide is all of the factors that shift supply. And so very same thing, and this is the one I'll build off for the graph. This is what you saw in your quiz. And so on the quiz, you were looking at the market for rice, and you ended up with a scenario of a drought. And so that drought would that would occur over here. It'd be these poor natural conditions for production. The drought has created a poor scenario for us to actually grow our product, and so it will cause a decrease in the supply. And so if I were to go into the practice of modeling that, let's start. So here, before I do anything, I need these pieces to exist in my figure before I start anything. I have my price on the y-axis, I have my quantity on the x-axis, I have my downward sloping demand curve, and I give it a subscript 0 to tell me that this is where I'm starting. And then I have my upward sloping supply curve with the same subscript. And so these subscripts tell me that before I did anything, before I ever shift anything, I start here with these zeros. Okay, so after we identify those pieces, then we also want to indicate our equilibrium price, and I'm going to give it that same subscript 0 because that's my starting equilibrium price, and an equilibrium quantity here, also having a 0. And so let's just do your example from the quiz here. We have the market for rice. So we have this market for rice, we have our all of our curves labeled out, we have our price, sorry about this, This looks horrible. We have our equilibrium price over here and our equilibrium quantity mapped out. And then on your quiz, I give you this information, and that is like from those slides, that's the factor. The factor is the thing that causes the shift. And so we get a drought, making it really difficult for us to grow rice. So we get poor natural conditions. Those poor natural conditions mean we're shifting our supply curve to the left. So I'm going to have a parallel shift in my market supply. And because this is my new supply curve, I'm going to give it the subscript 1. That tells me that this is my new supply after I experience the drought. At that new supply, the new equilibrium is now at the intersection of my new supply, indicated by S1, and my initial demand curve at D0. Important to note that we're only working with single shifts when we're drawing our figures. So, at this new supply, I have a new corresponding equilibrium quantity, and I have a new equilibrium price here at P1 star. So both of them are indicated by new subscripts, P1 here and Q1 down here. And if it helps you, always at the origin of your graph, give yourself a 0. And then as you plan it like all the way out here, imagine your x-axis goes to infinity and your y-axis, goes to infinity. And that will help you ground your analysis when you're identifying the impact on equilibrium price and quantity. So, following the shift, we have the drought that reduces the supply, and by decreasing our supply, we shift it to the left. We now get an increase in the equilibrium price. It's now more, each unit of rice is now more expensive because of the scarcity that's brought on by the drought, and we have less or a lower quantity of rice being supplied in the market. And so this is what's happening when we illustrate those figures, when we highlight these shifts. Whenever we have decreases, we just draw a shift to the left. And whenever we have an increase, we draw that shift to the right. If you're ever confused about like which one you think really should be the one that you're shifting, just reference back to these two slides. The first one is all your factors. These are all the things that can cause a shift in demand. The next one is your factors for supply. These are all the potential factors that can cause a shift in supply. And so on your exam, you'll have something that's related to one of these factors, and it's your job to be able to match that corresponding factor with the correct directional shift, and then highlight the impact on equilibrium price and quantity in your own figure. A lot of people got close on that quiz. Some of you did very well, but make sure you practice with this a little bit before you approach your exam. But best of luck, and that's all I have. Thanks.